Well, tariffs. Who do they belong to? Is it Congress? Is it the president? The Supreme Court is going to weigh in on that. But what implications does that have for the president's desire to take over Greenland? Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and I'm here with Kelly Hyman, and we're going to break all of this down because there's a lot of layers to this, isn't there, Kelly? So kind of get us up to speed. We know the Supreme Court's about to come out with a ruling. So the rumor has it this week. I've also heard sometime late February, but tell us a little bit about the state of play of this case and what your thoughts are.
So this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it boils down of whether Trump, in fact, has the power as the president to impose tariffs. Now, the argument is that tariffs are taxes, and so that only Congress has the ability to tax. However, the president's argument, or one of the arguments, is that based on this statute, the Emergency Economic Power Act that was in the 1970s, that based on that he in fact has the power to impose these tariffs. Ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to weigh in and let us know if he does have the power or if he doesn't have the power.
What do you think? Do you think he has the power? Because my understanding has always been, from case law, from precedent, everything, Congress has the power of the purse, right? Like, all the dollars have to flow through Congress. That's why we have government shutdowns. That's why the budget is always a big deal every time, it comes time for, Congress to be in session. So you think these arguments are going to fly or no?
We're going to have to wait and see what exactly the Supreme Court does, but we can see supposedly that some of the conservative judges are leaning towards Trump, where the liberal judges are not. Ultimately, what the Chief Justice does or Amy decides, I think are definitely going to be key, because as we know, there has to be a majority. So there's 9 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court. But I consider this one going, if it goes against Trump, being very close, like a 5-4 decision.
Yeah, because this has a lot of ramifications. Like, for instance, folks' refunds could be slowed down, right? And talk to us about that, because that is some craziness to think we may not get a refund because of tariffs. How does that?
Let's talk about the companies as well, first and foremost. So, in fact, there are allegedly over $1 billion that these companies have paid in taxes, in tariffs. So, in fact, if the Supreme Court said that Trump didn't have the authority, then getting the refund back to all these companies, and how is that going to, affect the consumer? Because tariffs, I believe, are tax, and the consumer ultimately pays the price for these tax, whether it's at going to the store, to the supermarket. I don't know about you, but there's definitely noticed an increase in prices. Last time I went to a local drugstore to purchase items. And so how is that going to ultimately, work out? And also, to your point about how is this all, affecting the consumer and the budget, and how that all is going to play out, we're just kind of waiting and seeing. Now, there's some argument that this whole money back to the companies is very complex, could be very messy. That's one argument. The other argument is, no, it's not. It can be really streamlined, that there can be a process in place to give the money back. Is that going to happen?
And where's the money? Because yes, you could, in theory, give the money back if you haven't already spent it, right? Or basically earmarked it for other purposes, i.e. ICE. Right? Like, where did that money go? Because again, it's not going through necessarily the normal channels, as in Congress was the one to say, okay, this is what happened. The Treasury Department takes over, et cetera. There's a process when money comes in, when we pay taxes and all of that. Was that process even followed in this instance? I mean, there's that to think about, right?
That's a really interesting point in how this all is ultimately going to play out. We'll have to see, but it's affecting the consumers. It's having, a detrimental effect on them when they go and purchase items, because of the tariffs and the cost.
Yeah, because sales are down. And I know that at one point the president had come down on Jeff Bezos, the owner basically of Amazon, because he had allegedly thought about putting a line item when people are in their checkout that, oh, okay, this is the price of the item, this is the tax, and this is the cost of the tariffs. So that people understand that, hey, it's not that whoever increased their price on lipstick or on, whatever, plastic goods, whatever the case may be, it's because of tariffs, we now have to charge more. Of course, the president came down on him. He chose not to do it. But at the end of the day, people still feel it in their pocketbooks. And we already are seeing a decline of people going out to eat, going out to bars, restaurants, because again, if you're paying more money for other things, you've got to prioritize. And now, again, that not only affects the consumer, but it affects all the other industries. So the folks in the restaurant industry, they're losing money, right? Because less people coming in, less tips, et cetera, et cetera. So it ends up being this more catastrophic effect for a broader array of people. So there's that. But how does this factor into Greenland? As someone who has been to Greenland, Kelly, tell us a little bit about that. Because, it's not just like a place on the map where people think Santa lives, right? There's actually almost 60,000 people that live there, and they have no interest in being part of the United States.
Greenland is one of the most beautiful places that I have ever been to. So I went on a boat. The first stop was in Iceland, and then on the boat and stopped along the way to different places in Greenland and went hiking, experienced the people, the culture, and just seeing the scenic views were just absolutely breathtaking. The waterfalls and the ice and went kayaking there, and it's absolutely beautiful. And the people are very, very warm, and it was a beautiful place to visit. But to your point now, Trump is using the tariffs to say that, here, if you Norway, we're going to give you additional tariffs. It'll be interesting to see if in fact that he can do that, depending on what the Supreme Court ultimately decides, of whether in fact that he has the power to say, yes, I'm imposing these tariffs, or ultimately, as you pointed out, the carrying of the purse is only to Congress.
And interestingly enough, so the Supreme Court is going to rule whether or not the president has the power to be able to impose tariffs in order to push, because in this Greenland context, his goal is to push the EU into supporting the US basically taking over Greenland, right? However, the EU also has the ability to clap back, and not in a nice way. So there is what they call basically the bazooka option. And so what this means is that literally it's a bazooka, right? Because it means that basically the EU can clap back and impose retaliatory tariffs on the US. So any US goods coming into Europe, hardcore tariffs on that. They can restrict the access to EU public contracts. So companies here that want to enter into contracts or bid for contracts and the such, as part of the EU, they can't do it, right? Because if the EU locks it down, that means you can't do business with us. And that means millions of dollars in losses. Then also it allows them to target US company services, IP rights, or investments. So that means they could potentially be freezing people's money. over there. And they can do all of this without waiting for like the World Trade Organization or anybody else. They can just get together, basically the European Commission, they get together and decide whether or not the president is acting in a coercive manner, because if you basically coerce any member of the EU through the use of tariffs or anything like that, once that decision has been made, the EU can then retaliate in kind, and that would be the bazooka option that I'm discussing at this point. Now, this has never been done before, right? Like, it was just one of those things that was created as, well, just in case we can't, use diplomacy, but I doubt we're ever going to have to use it. Well, now they're over here like blowing the dust off of it and being like, okay, this is the exact situation that this bazooka option was anticipating. So the process, European Commission decides whether or not coercion is occurring. If they do decide by a majority, then they can activate the mechanism. And then Brussels, which is where the EU is headquartered, they can still try to negotiate and kind of smooth things over, try to resolve things. But if it keeps going, they can, the EU can keep ratcheting it up from tariffs to, again, restrictions on market access to US businesses. So this is more than just, tit for tat, a little bit of war of words. This could literally implode whole US companies if the EU decides to exercise that option. I mean, do you think they will?
That's the $64,000 question. Are they going to do that, or maybe do some kind of version of it? I hope it doesn't come to that, where that's the bazooka, the last kind of option to do. But in this day and age, we just don't know what's going to happen. I think that the Supreme Court decision is definitely going to play a key role in that. It's saying that if in fact the Supreme Court determines that Trump does not have the authority to do that, then the argument can be made that there goes his leverage, so to speak, on the fact that he can assert that he, has the power to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that there might try alternative ways to do that with some other statutory basis or legal grounds. But from the standpoint of what's going to happen, that's definitely the Supreme Court decision is going to play a key role and is center to all this.
Well, we wait with bated breath to see what the Supremes have to say on this. And we'll be sure to come back and keep y'all updated on what their decision is and then what the fallout may be as a result of that. So again, make sure to like, comment, subscribe to Legal AF for all things at the intersection of politics and law. I'm Melba Pearson, also otherwise known as the Resident Legal Diva. That's Kelly Hyman. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next time.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.